Hey guys, I hope you're all doing really well. I'm Allure Cosplay, and in today's video, I'm gonna take apart and harvest my time deck. Let's go. For my time deck, I chose Joyra as my commander. She is pretty cheap to cast. She's only 1 red, 1 blue, and 1 colorless. With her ability, you pay 2, you exile a non-land card from your hand. It doesn't matter what the mana cost of that card is. And then you put 4 time counters on it. After 4 turns, that card is cast. A really good thing about this commander is that you can cast really big spells using her suspend ability. I can get Joyra out by turn 3 unless I mana ramp. Casting those big spells though is very slow because it takes 4 turns for them to actually come on the battlefield. Once the card is suspended, it comes with the 4 time counters, but it comes out face up. That means that every opponent can see exactly what's going to happen in 4 turns. Because it only costs 2 to suspend a card, it empties out your hand pretty fast, so you have to put a lot of card draw in this deck. As this is a time deck, it's unfortunately very slow, so by turn 10 you can start seeing some build up on your board, and usually by turn 10 everybody else's board is pretty packed. This is only a 2-color deck, so I have 35 lands altogether. I have very few dual lands. The only special lands that I really added was Command Tower, because every multicolor deck can use one. And also Reliquary Tower, because once you add a bunch of card draw, you definitely need no maximum hand size so you can suspend all those cards instead of discarding them. And now let's do the artifacts. I have a bunch of mana artifacts, including obviously Soul Ring and Arcane Signet. That should be in every single deck, period. I also added Joyra's Time Bug. It's an artifact creature insect. When you tap it, you can remove a time counter off of suspended spell. And this is one of my favorite artifacts. This is definitely going in a different deck after I take this apart. It's the God Pharaoh statue. Spells your opponent's cast cost 2 more to cast. It's great for controlling the table, especially when everybody else is pumping out all kinds of stuff on their board and you are not. You're just waiting for suspend stuff to be unsuspended. And also, at the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses 1 life. It's just great. I love this artifact as well, the Grimoire of the Dead. It only costs 4, and you can discard a card and put a study counter on the Grimoire of the Dead. When you remove 3 study counters, all the creatures from all graveyards go onto the battlefield under your control. That's amazing. It doesn't actually go off very often because people are afraid of it, and this is definitely a late game kind of artifact. I also added Pyromancer's Goggles. I really like this artifact. However, I found out too late that it doesn't really work with this deck. It allows you to add 1 red mana to your mana pool when you tap it, and when you cast an instant or a sorcery, it allows you to copy that spell and choose new targets for it. Unfortunately, it does not work with suspended cards because they're not being cast from your hand, they're coming out of suspend. So that's unfortunate. It's a great artifact though. And finally, after I've cast those really big creatures, I need to help them out, so I have Whisper Silk Cloak, which makes my creature unblockable and can be a target of spells or abilities. I have Haunted Cloak, which gives me Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. And I have Blinding Powder, which prevents all damage that would be done to this creature this turn by unattaching this artifact, and I can just reattach it back next turn as long as it's not destroyed. Okay, Cake wanted to be a part of the video, so I guess he now is. And now let's do the instances. We'll start with the more expensive ones to cast. Explosive Welcome deals 5 damage to any target, deals 3 damage to any other target, and adds 3 mana to your mana pool. Opportunity, target player draws 4 cards. Creative Outburst, that's also pretty expensive. It deals 5 damage to any target. Look at the top 5 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Time Crafting basically removes time counter from those really big spells that you're trying to cast. Slithering Song, this is an amazing artifact. It should be in any red deck. It only costs 3, but you get 5 mana, and if you manage to copy this, you can just double your mana. Steam Augury, this is pretty cheap to cast. Review the top 5 cards of your library and separate them into 2 piles. An opponent chooses one of those piles, put that pile into your hand and the other into the graveyard. Hinder counters the target spell. Smash to smithereens, destroy target artifact. It also deals 3 damage to that artifact's controller. That's it for the instance. And now let's do some enchantments. With this one, whenever you cast a spell from your hand, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is the spell's mana value. You may cast that spell with the mana value X or less among those cards revealed this way without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Really good card. With this one, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under my control, it deals damage equal to the power to any target. This one basically really helps with card draw. With this one, if a creature you control would deal damage to a permanent or a player, it deals double that damage. I love that. This is one of my favorite ones. If you would draw a card, draw 2 cards instead. It's really pricey to cast though, but it's really good. With this one, it basically enchanted creature can be target of spells or abilities. That's mostly for my commander because everyone wants to get rid of my commander so I can stop suspending stuff. And Double Vision. This is a great card. It unfortunately does not work with this deck because it needs to be cast from your hand and not from suspend. Whenever you cast your first instant sorcery spell each turn, copy that spell. You may choose new target for the copy. And now let's do some sorceries. Mana Geyser is an amazing and a staple for a red deck card. It adds you 1 mana for each tapped land your opponents control. If you have a lot of opponents, that's amazing. Chain Reaction, it deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. It's basically a board wipe for creatures. Apex of Power, exile the top 7 cards of your library. Until the end of turn, you may cast spells from among them. This is a really expensive to cast spell. However, if this spell was cast from your hand, add 10 mana of any one color. It would also be amazing if you can copy that spell somehow. This one is also pretty expensive. Exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard. Copy that card 3 times. You may cast the copies without paying their mana cost. Then you exile this card. I have a couple of take an extra turn cards. Brass's Bounty, love that card too. For each land you control, create a treasure token. It's also pretty pricey to cast though. But once you have all those treasure tokens, you're just smooth sailing. This one, target player draws 7 cards. Return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. It deals damage equal to that card's mana value to each creature your opponents control. You exile this card after. With this one, you scry X, with X is the highest converted mana cost among permanents you control, then draw 3 cards. This is pretty cheap. I usually cast that from my hand. Sometimes I'll cast this one from my hand too. Draw cards equal to the highest converted mana cost among permanents you control. I have some permanents that are like 10 mana. And of course, Blasphemous Act. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. So if there's like a bunch of tokens or a bunch of different creatures, that's amazing. This card will cost you very little to cast. It deals 13 damage to each creature, including yours, unfortunately. And here are a few cheaper creatures to cast, a few that return instants or sorceries from the graveyard to my hand. This one pings for damage and draws me cards. And these ones really help with suspended cards because they remove time counters off of them. And now let's do some of the big boys. I have 3 different Niv Mizzets. They basically ping for damage and help with card draw. Etali, I love Etali. When it attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. Then you may cast any number of spells from among them without paying their mana costs. Love it. This Leviathan, all lands are islands in addition to their other types. Creatures without flying or island walk can't attack. With this one, when it enters the battlefield, target opponent chooses a permanent he or she controls at random and sacrifices it. If a non-land permanent is sacrificed this way, repeat the process. This is a really good way to diminish somebody else's board. This guy has Island Walk and Trample. and Shroud. Love that. This is very specific to this deck. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if this Cracker is suspended, remove a time counter from it. Elder Dinosaur, it can't be countered. You have no maximum hand size, and whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, draw a card. Discard 3 cards. You can exile this, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. This guy's a wizard. If you tap him, he draws 3 cards. Love it. Another Kraken, when it enters the battlefield or whenever you cast a spell with converted mana cost 6 or greater, you may return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. A human wizard. Creatures you control have flying. Creatures your opponents control lose flying and can't have or gain flying. Love it. This one, it costs 10 to cast, but whenever you cast this, put a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token onto the battlefield. So basically you cast this and you get another free 10/10 token. An elemental. At the beginning of each upkeep, you may tap or untap target permanent. Very useful. This avatar, he has flying, and whenever it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, you may cast up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If a card is cast this way, it would be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead. And then I have this Kraken. He has hexproof unless it's attacking or blocking. It can be blocked unless all creatures a defending player controls block it. Although a lot of these cards are very expensive to cast, they were actually pretty cheap to buy. If I was to fix this deck, I probably would get a few more creatures that are a little bit more pricey and out of my budget for just trying this deck out. And I would definitely remove stuff like this. This is amazing in other decks, but I cannot use it in this deck, so it's kind of useless to me. I would probably also look for more creatures or spells that remove time counters, as I only have like 5 or 6 cards, and in a deck of 100, they're kind of hard to find. I would also add some more dual lands and some more win conditions because this deck has none right now. Here are a few cards I'm going to harvest from this deck and put into other decks. Like I said, I love this artifact. Liquor Tower, I need some no maximum hand size in a few of my other decks. Etali, I need to build around Etali or put her in another deck. Those Niv Mizzets, they have to go somewhere as well. I really like this one. Creatures you control have flying. Creatures your opponents control lose flying. Bye-bye, dragons. I'm just kidding. Pyromancer's Goggles, I need to put that in a deck that actually does it justice. And thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe for more random content from me. Don't forget to click the notification button so you know when I upload next. Bye!